Hello and welcome to the third part in my series, Jesus and Religion. This time we're talking about Jesus and politics, a very controversial topic. Begin with this question: should religion be kept out of politics? Many people in the minority Western world would automatically and immediately say yes. Also, those influenced by ideas of democracy and freedom and individualism would also say yes. Some time ago, I was doing an interview with some young people in the streets of Brazil. I was making a television program and my leading question was, should religion be kept out of politics? And everybody said yes, emphatically yes. Doubtless they were thinking about the powerful Catholic and evangelical lobbies at work in Brazilian politics, resisting such unwelcome interference. But my follow-up questions were, do you think politicians in power should love and care for the people they represent? Do you think they should be honest, truthful, and not look for personal gain? Do you think corruption should be rooted out of politics? And immediately the reply was yes. But these values are not merely political, they are human, they are spiritual. And it seems to me that politics could benefit from many values traditionally associated with religion and spirituality. Now, the modern secular state is a fairly recent invention in history. There are two main ideas behind that. First of all, there's the freedom of belief. The state should not attach itself to any one religion and should not promote one religion above another. The government must not dictate the religious beliefs of people. They should be free to believe, not to believe, or change what they believe. There should be no coercion, no forcing of people to believe this religion or that religion. The second idea is that religion must be a matter of private opinion and not public fact. Now, this idea is philosophically biased. It adopts the philosophy called materialism. All that exists, or that we can be sure about, is the physical world. The existence of the spiritual realm or non-material forces is a matter of opinion, only a matter of opinion. And therefore, such ideas have no real place in the public realm, and certainly not in how we govern ourselves politically. The first idea, that of freedom, to my mind, is a good one. We should be free to choose our religious beliefs or choose to have no religious beliefs. But the second idea, that faith or religion is entirely a private, not a public matter, seems to me to be going too far. It means that religious faith or religious values should have no place in public life at all. Now, one of the roles of religion in society is to inform people's conscience, to remind society of moral duties and the higher values of life and living. Religion should not dictate, but it can inform. Many people in British political history, for example, have achieved remarkably enlightened goals because they had faith in God or had a spiritual conscience, a deep sense of responsibility to their fellow members of the human family. For example, the great evangelical social reformers of the 19th century in Britain, William Wilberforce, who helped eradicate transatlantic slavery, the 7th Earl of Shaftesbury, who was also involved in the abolition of slavery, as well as improving conditions for the mentally ill, child labourers, factory workers, boy chimney sweepers, and the suppression of the opium trade. The state cannot do everything, and certainly not determine what its citizens should believe in matters of conscience. In this case, that of extreme secularism, the state has become all-powerful and tends towards totalitarianism, a strange form of religious-type control. Perhaps there should be an understanding between these two bodies, one where there can be collaboration and not antagonism, and also a mutual calling to account. When we ask the question, should religion be kept out of politics, we could answer, in some respects, yes, but in other respects, no. It can have a part to play, provided it does not control people's consciences or dictate their beliefs. But there's another important question. should politics be kept out of religion? For much of world history, government or politics were virtually one and the same thing. The union of religion and state, or at the very least, the religion having a prominent place in the state, is also a dominant idea in many nations around the world today. And politics itself is often driven by ideologies, many of which have not been objectively proven, and some of which have totally failed to deliver. The problem really has to do with freedom. Freedom to think, freedom to discover, freedom to choose, freedom not to be dictated to by the state. An example of a modern secular state is France, where la laïcité reigns supreme. France is governed by the people, the lay people, not the curates, the religious people. Some time ago, when we were looking for permission for a church in Paris, we had to go to the local authorities, and we found insurmountable resistance to the very idea of putting a church in this place or that place. And so we posed the question, suggesting that this really ought to be a matter of freedom of religion. Well, the French official replied, "No, monsieur, here in France we have freedom of thought, not freedom of religion." It seems to me that in this case, the state has become not just a bureaucratic or autocratic body, but a quasi-theocratic body in nature, bordering on seeing itself as all-powerful. A theocracy is when the state and religion are one. The rules of the government are the same as the rules of the religion, supposedly on behalf of God. This was the situation in ancient and much of medieval history. In Old Testament times, for example, the Hebrew people lived under a theocracy. The nation was under religious law. The laws of God were also the laws of the land. Religion controlled the whole of life: national, civil, military, family, law. The law of Moses covered what you could or could not eat, what kind of clothing you could wear, the religious rituals, national religious festivals, local worship, moral provisions, and all civil matters. The idea of the union of religion and state was also the general view of many of the great world empires of history: the Persian Empire, the Roman Empire, the Christian Byzantine Empire, and the Islamic Empire. All these had more or less the same view: one God, one people, one empire, one government, under the rule of one religion. That was said to represent God on the earth. All this was long before the modern democratic state that upheld individual rights and freedom for all. This explains why in those days, and it's still the case today in some parts of the world, that people engaged in religious wars. They were not only defending or advancing their own territory or their country, they were defending or advancing the cause of their God, their religion. This is still the motive behind many acts of violence and efforts of the holy wars of today. People today are still being tried and condemned to death by governments for blasphemy, adultery, sodomy, as well as perjury or theft. As a Christian, I'm obviously interested to know what Jesus thinks about all of this. What did he teach? When I look into it, I find myself more drawn to him than ever. What did Jesus have to say about politics? Jesus was revolutionary for his time in that he taught a separation of powers, a separation of religion and state, whether church, mosque, synagogue, or temple. We find this in the story of the denarius. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and give to God what is God's. Jesus gives this quick and astute response to a tricky question about taxation. In doing so, he introduced a revolutionary change in attitude to the one state, one religion approach. When asked by a delegation of Pharisees and Herodians, those two groups were usually arch enemies, whether Jews should pay taxes to Caesar or not. Jesus' reply was monumental and introduced the new principle of separating the church or religion from the state. His response also dealt with the trap they had set for him. If he had said yes, he would have been sanctioning Caesar's authority and by implication, Caesar's religion. If he had said no, he would have been obeying the Mosaic law, which said, "You shall not put a foreigner over you, one who is not your brother," but he would have been in serious difficulty with the Romans. The denarius Jesus used to illustrate his teaching was an idolatrous and blasphemous coin to the Jews. Denarii, both from the period of Augustus and Tiberius, ascribed glory to the emperor. A denarius during the time of Tiberius had on the obverse an image of the emperor with this inscription: Tiberius Caesar Augustus, son of the divine Augustus. And on the opposite side of the coin, the reverse, was inscribed the words Pontifex Maximus, which mean the highest priest. The denarius therefore claimed that the emperor had religious, even divine status. As ever, Jesus showed that his personal authority was greater than the law of Moses, and perhaps for the first time in history, he separated the claims of the state and of religion. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and give to God what is God's. In other words, Jesus was saying that his followers should give civil obedience and respect to the king. But the king had no right to prescribe the religious beliefs of his subjects. Instead of speaking about one state, one religion, Jesus instructed people to abide by the distinctive authorities of Caesar and God in their parallel realms. He was not asking us to carve out two lives, one spiritual life and the other secular life. Rather, he was telling us to live one godly life and to learn to distinguish and obey two different, overlapping but distinct areas of authority over our one life. Jesus was also asking us to remember the one who is above all earthly rulers and authorities, the one to whom all kings and governors must give account. The God who created us all and who created us in his image. Just as that coin bore the image of Caesar, so your life bears the image of God. So give to God what is God's. And this is the real challenge of the Christian faith. It's not about what political party you favor or which system of government you prefer. It's about the claims of God over the whole of your life. The God who created you is the God who loves you and wants to draw you to himself and into a way of living that is not only good for you, but also brings glory to him. When we talk about Jesus and politics, sooner or later we have to begin to consider what Jesus said about the government of God. What is the government of God? In Jesus' trial before the Roman governor Pontius Pilate, there's this interaction, there's this discussion. Pilate, it says in John chapter 18, verse 33, Pilate went back into his headquarters and called for Jesus to be brought to him. "Are you the king of the Jews?" he asked him. Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not an earthly kingdom. If it were, my followers would fight to keep me from being handed over to the Jewish leaders. But my kingdom is not of this world." Pilate said, "So you are a king?" Jesus responded, "You say I'm a king. Actually, I was born and came into the world to testify to the truth. All who love the truth recognize that what I say is true." Now, a key part of this conversation is what Jesus said about his kingdom not being of this world. This means that God's government, his rule over our lives, does not come through earthly, human-based initiatives or any form of governmental control. It is supernatural. It comes from above, from God. And this whole conversation reveals a total confusion of issues on the part of the Jewish and Roman leaders, a mixing of religion and politics. The religious leaders were envious of Jesus' popularity. They contrived to have him executed for insurrection, for him having claimed to be the King of the Jews, a political title. This was the cynical use of politics by religious people. But Jesus' kingdom was not a political one, not in the usual sense of the word. It had to do with the rule of God welcomed into people's hearts. But Pilate's decision was a decision to condemn Jesus to death in order to appease the religious people. No wonder people say religion and politics do not mix. Indeed, they should never be one and the same. Politics is responsible for civil matters, and religion has to do with spiritual matters. Political governors should uphold freedom of religion and freedom of belief for all, but religious leaders should also be prepared to challenge the moral conscience and the policies of any government on spiritual grounds. If you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share it, and also leave some comments below. Check out my other videos, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel.